So we're going to move on, and we're going to dive into a company which we've heard mentioned in almost every panel, in almost every conversation, because they are a true creator of our digital society and future. And I've asked an old-time Sime friend and one of the sort of the cornerstones of Google's Nordic operation, Gustav Radell, welcome up on stage and share what's cooking in Mountain View with Google. Welcome to Sime.
Thank you.
Have a seat.
Thank you.
So, you guys are one of the most innovative companies, or probably the most innovative company in the tech space. So I want to find out what's happening. What are some of the most exciting things you're doing? And in order for me to sort of get it compartmentalized in my brain, I'd like to start out with search and then find what you're doing in mobile and YouTube and sort of go through the whole thing and give me an update. What happens in search?
Wow. So first of all, thank you for being here. As I said, when I first started Google 8 years ago, one of my first assignments was actually Sime. So I was packing goodie bags outside. So for anybody of you who wants to go on stage, it takes 8 years of kissing up to Ola, then you get on the big stage. And I think you also had gold shoes back in the day, so maybe it was...
You know, silver and wisdom is better than gold.
I guess so.
But,
no, but in terms of search, I often hear people talk about search as sort of a solved problem, which I don't think is true. I think we're still at a very, very early stage of search. So when Larry and Sergey first launched Google back in the days, it was a pretty rough experience, right? The first iteration only had like 10 text lines, right? But then, I don't know if you remember, in 2000, it was the Grammy Awards, and Jennifer Lopez wore this, let's put it, interesting green dress. I know you remember it, at least. So people started to sort of search for this dress, and sort of searches spiked, and people didn't want to see text links, they want to see pictures. And then sort of image search was born. And the same thing with 9/11. People were searching like crazy for those horrible events. And, but they didn't want to sort of read about the World Trade Center, they want to see what was happening in the news. So news was born. And I think that there's also, as Google has grown, for example, when we talk about that the internet is not only for English-speaking countries, of course. I mean, I think that a product that nobody really overlooks and nobody really sort of pays too much attention about is like Google Translate, who has over 1 billion translation each day and used by over 200 million each day. So Google has really evolved slowly but surely. And I remember when going back to Sime again, when it was in 2006, 2007, and we showed you guys sort of Google Earth.
Yeah, and
people
was
was like,
up,
whoa, what is this? And I think some of the stuff that we're going to show you today is sort of like quite mind-boggling where we've gone in just 8 years. So I think, but in terms of what's actually going to happen in search, we're seeing obviously the big shift to mobile. And I think that we're going to see more of sort of a dialogue. We're going to be able to answer questions and also anticipate. So I think that you once told me you should never do live demos on stage, but I'm actually going to try to make sort of show you what that means. So let's see here. Okay, Google. Who's the king of Sweden?
Carl 16, Gustav of Sweden is the king of Sweden.
Okay, Google. How old is he? Excitement. No.
He is 68 years old.
Yes.
Oh, yes. Not bad.
Well, it might seem fairly simple, right? But it is actually sort of anticipating what I'm going to say. So it knows and puts things in context. It's hearing that I'm asking about who's the king of Sweden, but then it also understands later on that I'm talking about our king and that how old is he. I think those are the type of things that we're trying to sort of wrap our mind around. And I think that once we really crack voice search, I think it's going to be quite exciting to see what areas we move into, if it's cars or whatnot.
But isn't that super scary? Because you do all your business by people clicking on things, and if you do this over voice, there was no click there, I couldn't find any advertising. No. Are you disrupting yourselves?
Well, I think, first of all, you have to sort of remind yourself that Google isn't useful because it's popular. It's popular because it's useful. And I think that's sort of the main thing that we're trying to put forward. I think that we also need to sort of, and that people need to subscribe to the idea that sort of the internet is not a zero-sum game. in terms of when we talk about us disrupting, we talk about often sort of the next 5 billion people, meaning that today we're around 2.5 billion people on the web, and by 2020 that is going to double. So I think those are the type of things that, once again, that we need to sort of understand, and that we need to sort of build our strategy going forward, whether it's on mobile, on desktop, or if it's devices, or if it's in cars, or in flying cars, or whatnot. So those are the type of things we're thinking about at the moment.
And what happens and you acquired YouTube, everybody thought it was a staggering number, $1.6 billion for such a young company. Now it's like the TV station of all TV stations.
Yeah, no, it's quite exciting. And I think that many people often ask me, is YouTube just cats on skateboard? And yes, it should be cats on skateboard. But it's quite funny that I think we were here last year, and we often talk about how many hours of video that are uploaded to YouTube every minute. So that number was last year 100 hours of video each minute, 24/7. So it's an amazing amount of content, right? Well, today we're actually going to, for the first time, publish that number has gone from 100 in 1 year to 300 hours per minute, 24/7. So sort of the velocity of people coming on board to the platform is quite staggering. And I think that, I mean, most of us this summer, obviously many of us heard PewDiePie on Sommar in P1, and I tried to explain that to my mom. What does this guy do? And I was like, well, he's screaming at a computer and he plays video games. And she's like, oh, okay, that makes sense. But it is quite interesting to see sort of the big trends also being obviously curation, seeing more professional channels on YouTube, and then also some various forms of subscription models.
But also the advertiser community has awoken to YouTube and are moving in.
Definitely. So when I go out and talk to my colleagues throughout the world, they're really excited about some of the stuff that's coming out of the Nordics. Actually, last year, out of the top 10 videos, 3 of them were from Sweden. We had PewDiePie, we had Van Damme, and we had Ylvis. So I think that the rise of the multi-channel networks in the Nordics, like Splay and United Screens, I think they're really front runners, and I think we're going to see a lot of really cool content coming out of YouTube and cool advertising solutions as well.
You were the first company to say mobile first. That was some years ago. What does mobile first mean for you now? What happens in the mobile?
Well, Eric, our chairman, says that we're a mobile-first company. But I think going back to what I said earlier about talking about our journey, it's not us suddenly deciding that now we're going to go mobile. It's really sort of the user and listening to the users, what they want. So right now, well over 50% of all of our searches are coming from mobile, which is quite an astonishing number as well. However, I think there's still a lot of Swedish companies that had a lot of due diligence to do. I think there was a report quite recently that over 50% of Swedish companies don't have a mobile adapted website. So you're literally closing the window to the world, going back to this sort of the next 5 billion people. So the two macro trends are really sort of the next 5 billion people, and that any device that can be connected will be connected, whether it's glasses or watches or whatnot.
I want to dig a little bit deeper into mobile. What are the specific things that are happening in the mobile? What will be the next Google mobile experience, both for me as a user and maybe for me as an advertiser?
Well, as I said, I think that many of us are talking about sort of can I leave the home without my cell phone, and sort of can I deconnect? And I think that for us, we're really trying to think about also sort of how can we get technology out of the way for people and allow people to be people. So I think that we're going to try to get voice search and really crack that one, because I think that we're still at a very, very early stage of that.
Innovation in Google. So there's the famous 20% rule. Most of you would know that. If you work at Google, you have 20% of your working time to play around with new ideas, concepts, and things. And many wonderful innovation have come from that grassroots movement. But then you also have GoogleX.
GoogleX, that's true.
And GoogleX was so exciting, thought Sergey Brin, one of the founders, so he actually left to run that. What is GoogleX?
So when I try to explain what GoogleX is, I think I have a good explanation. It's like the Willy Wonka factory, but all of the Oompa Loompas has PhDs. That's really what it is. So I actually think that we have a video that we want to show, sort of some of the stuff that is right now coming out of GoogleX. Mats, can we roll the video?
And that's actually pretty cool. With smart contact lenses, balloons giving Wi-Fi to sub-Saharan Africa, self-flying cars and self-driving cars.
Yeah.
How the hell do you start coming up with these things? What is how do you do it?
Well, first of all, I think that the sort of philosophy that Sergey and the team has is often something that we call Moonshot Thinking, or 10x. So just an example, if you have a car that it takes 10 days to produce, you can probably change supplier and sort of try to finalize and sort of make small tweaks and get that down to 9 days. But if I tell you that it has to sort of be produced in 1 day, you have to start over. And sort of moonshot thinking and 10x thinking is really about sort of that we don't bother about that we can't teleport from Circus to Copenhagen, because there's a certain part of you that says that that's not realistic. So the moonshot thinking in GoogleX is chosen to be bothered by those ideas. So some of the stuff that we saw here that I'm super excited about is, for example, Project Loon. So the sort of whole hypothesis is that the world, as I said, is only 2.5 people online, 2.5 billion people online. Well, what Project Loon is that we are right now sending up 80,000 weather balloons starting in Australia and New Zealand and using geothermic winds to give the whole world free Wi-Fi. So, I mean, that's really sort of a 10x idea, but it's actually working at the moment. So if you go into a site called solve4x.com, you can actually see these balloons.
Solve4x.com.
You can see all these crazy ideas that's right now going on. And I think that it's also about GoogleX is really, you have sort of radical technology trying to take on big problems. So when Larry started to talk about, and also Sergey, for that matter, talking about self-driving cars, they didn't start by saying, okay, we should refine the search engine or something like that. They started to talk about, there's over 1 million people that dies each year from car accident. Is there a way that we can, with technology, solve that? So now the self-driving cars has been driving for almost two years, I think it is, and they haven't had a single accident so far. So it's sort of this big, audacious problem. And I think that for us, being, as you say, in the limelight of a lot of the stuff we're doing, I think that it is worth knowing that the next Google won't do what Google does. And with that mindset...
But stop there. The next Google won't do what Google does.
And
think about your own industry and your own business, that the next iteration of you is not doing at all what you're doing today. That's a pretty challenging thought.
Yeah, so with that in mind, I think that we need to sort of stay ahead of the game and think about what is the world going to look like in 10 years. And some of these ideas, I mean, for example, we saw Android One. I mean, Android, when we launched that back in the days, people were like, okay, don't bother, guys. Well, now we activate over 1 million Android devices each day throughout the world. And Android One that we launched recently, it's a smartphone with a data package and all that for $100. That we're launching right now in India and sort of trying to scale and bring the world onto the web. So I think that those are the type of things. And somebody might say that, well, I'm a florist. I sell flowers online. Why do I have to care about self-driving cars? Well, if you saw Project Wing, for example, taking the same technology as self-driving cars, but now we're testing it also in Australia, that they can actually deliver goods, medicines, and those type of things. So it's really interesting to see that this is probably, hopefully, some of these technologies will not disrupt, but amplify a lot of the industries that are represented here today.
But it's difficult to invent things. I mean, I went to Mountain View and saw the Google Car project, and they've actually got some negative feedback because they looked so scary, the first version. People thought about the Terminator. So now the new cars, they look more like Ahlgrens bilar. They look like toys. And you have happy senior citizens driving around in these cars. When you look at Google Glass, there was a lot of backlash also because people were afraid they're being filmed and so forth. Can you reflect on that, sort of?
Well, from a marketing perspective, and that's sort of what we do, we're trying to sort of know the user and know the magic, which in this case is Google Glass, and sort of how can we connect the two. And I think you have to remind yourself that Google Glass is sort of first of its kind. It's sort of the first one out of the gate. So we're still trying to make iteration. Even I don't know exactly how am I going to use it. Is it for running, etc. But it's quite interesting also to see that the type of industries that are taking on glasses is, for example, firefighters who use Google Glass and indoor maps when actually going into houses that is full of smoke in it. Doctors who have specialists on the other side of the world trying to look at the same stuff that they're doing. So I think that we are just at the beginning of trying to understand what these type of wearables, and I mean, we haven't even sort of commercialized it yet, and I mean, we haven't launched it publicly yet. So I mean, we're slowly but surely starting to think about sort of what does the user want? I say, know the user, know the magic, and sort of how we connect the two. Another thing
so Google's credo is don't be evil.
Yes.
And GoogleX, they also have a prerequisite that the ideas needs to touch hundreds of millions of people, or maybe even 1 billion people have that potential. Why is this important? We're going to talk a lot later today about sort of social consciousness and corporate citizenship. And I want to hear your view on that.
Well, first of all, I think that what we're trying to apply is sort of the toothbrush test, which is, I mean, is this something that hundreds of millions of people are going to use twice a day? Maybe then we should start bothering about it. So the toothbrush test is a pretty good one. But I think that we've always said that don't be evil, and I truly think that Larry and the team are really trying to sort of pursue that dream and continue that philosophy. It's quite interesting also to see now when we're investing, for example, in our lenses, our contact lenses.
So what can they do?
So what the lenses is, they measure actually, I mean, there's millions of people obviously with diabetes throughout the world. So these contact lenses measure the sugar in your tears, and it connects it to your phone, and you can actually see when your blood sugar is low. And this is something that we then sort of went public with, and we actually gave it away for free to other companies. So I think that we are slowly but surely starting to sort of wrap our mind around those type of big ideas.
Yeah, I heard a speech by Larry when he said, with great wealth comes great responsibility.
Yeah, that is
so
true.
If he sleeps a day, that means 10,000 people weren't saved.
Yeah, no, I don't know about that.
No, but
I think also, I mean, I think he actually often refers to something that Albert Einstein said. If the idea is not crazy at first, it is not worth pursuing, and there's no hope for it. So I think those are the things.
What's most exciting for you here in the Nordics? You hijacked another old-time Sime friend, Anders Berglund.
Yes.
He was the strong man behind Schibsted Sweden, and he's done a lot of great work in Schibsted. Now he joined as the new CEO for Google.
Yes.
Sitting here in front row. Hi, Anders.
Keeping track of me.
Yeah, keeping track of you. What does he bring with him from the media industry?
Well, obviously, a lot of experience from the publicist world, and how we can actually get closer and sort of work closer with the great publicists in the Nordics, like Schibsted or Bonnier, for that matter. I think that is really interesting, sort of pick his brain on that. And obviously an amazing haircut as well. So.
Yeah, most people have sort of parties for their clients and customers like that. Anders have had a long tradition of having parties for his suppliers, which I think is a sweet touch that I like very much. What's next for Google Sweden? What will we see next year that we don't know about? Nobody here tells secrets. So it's
no, exactly. No, but obviously going back to what I said earlier, I think that we are really excited about the tech community in the Nordics. When I go travel to my colleagues throughout Europe and the US, previously it was like, where are you from? It's like Stockholm. Oh, so that cheese, Switzerland? I'm like, no, Stockholm. It's absolute vodka and those type of things. But now, when we mention Stockholm, when we mention Sweden, they're like really excited about the creativity and the amount of amazing companies coming from the Nordics in general. So I think that from a Google perspective, we need to sort of figure out how can we play a part in that ecosystem, both in terms of from sort of a venture perspective, but obviously also from sort of, you mentioned YouTube earlier. I mean, there's tons of cool content coming from here. How can we sort of be a part of that ecosystem and fuel that ecosystem in any sense? If that is a physical location or if that's a program with you, I don't know. But I mean, if you have great ideas, come to us. We're more than happy to discuss.
An open innovation to co-create. Thank you very much, Gustav, for the rundown.
Thank you very much.
Stuff.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.